Hey everyone, welcome to What Does That Piece Do? My name's Joe, and I'm kicking off a new video segment on this channel called Page Turner. That's where I look at a particular moments or events in history and try and find that one game and the one book that really pairs well together. So ideally, this is something that you can read, then play the game, or play the game, read the book, or read a bit, play some, read some more, play again, whatever suits you, right? In this first video, I'm going to look at 3 of my favorite games and 3 of my favorite books that go along with them. In the future, I may cover just games that I've played with books I'm looking forward to reading, or maybe books that I've read. I'm looking for the right game. Does that game even exist yet? You know, just maybe give some ideas to future designers out there. Some of these are pairings that I've discovered on my own. You know, either I read a really interesting book on a particular topic and then I sought out the game, or I played a really interesting game and I sought out the book from the recommendation of the game designer or from other folks. Sometimes it comes within the other gaming community, other avid history gamers. Some of that has come from a BoardGameGeek geek list I started a little while ago. It's history, books, and games paired together. Just for my own curation of these games and books, and some other people have contributed to it. Actually, quite a few people have contributed to it, so got a lot of great ideas there. So if you want to check that out yourself, in the description below, you should find a link to that as well. By the way, while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can get more goodies on history gaming in general. So let me just start off by saying, yeah, I like reading about history, especially topics that I didn't learn much about in school, right? But the book, the writing style, the narrative that comes through, it's got to be really compelling to me, right? Like, let's face it, there's volume after volume of writing out there that's just, you know, dates and names and this happened and that happened, very, you know, scholarly type writings that, you know, sometimes I don't find that compelling myself anyway. You might, but I need something with a little bit more of a story to it, right? Like, but that's why I really like these games that I've been exploring, because it's very engaging and it gives us more than just the dates and names and what happened to who, when. It's more about, you know, how did this happen? How did these things come about? How did it feel? And how are the decisions being made during this time period? So, anyway, let's do this then. We're going to look at the 3 games that I'd recommend and the 3 books that I'd recommend to go with them. First off, it's one of my favorite games, Pax Pamir, 2nd edition by Cole Worley on Whirligig Games. And it goes along with the book Return of a King by William Dalrymple. Now, anyone that owns this game already probably isn't any surprise, because Cole himself, the designer, actually lists this book as a big point of reference for the game design. It's in the rules. You can check it out yourself. The setting is Afghanistan in the 19th century during the Great Game, which saw British and Russian armies trying to control this mountainous landlocked region of Afghanistan, you know, this gateway to India and China, and ultimate control over the Silk Roads too. So this is a game that I had played at first. I heard so many great things about it. Even though it's such a heavy topic, there's a lot of praise for the game. A lot of people really interested in it, you know, Euro gamers and history gamers alike. So then I read the book after reading Cole's references. You can totally see how the characters, the cards in this game, they're born right out of this text. There's even some shared imagery used in both the book and on the game cards themselves. You could probably even take a lot of the cards and wedge them into the book as a bookmark for when they first show up and appear on record here in the book. It would probably wreck your physical copy though if you do that. The game itself, it's not a direct model of any one conflict over this series of events here. Rather, it shows how shifting allegiances can define victory conditions and alter the outcome of the game. As players, you're representing a major tribe in Afghanistan, and you're showing allegiance to either the Afghan rulers at the time or the Russians or the British. It's somewhat abstract. It's actually pretty abstract. It's the map itself. It's not specifically a detailed map of Afghanistan, so it's not a model of the conflict or on rails by any stretch of the imagination. Some wargame grognards or history buffs, they might take issue with that. Like, there's no way Russia could assert dominance like that in Kabul with quits so late in the game. This guy committed suicide years before. No, it's not that type of game, right? What it does is it uses the characters and elements of the great game as a framework to create its own game. So you'll get to understand what those people, places, and things meant to the conflict and meant to Afghanistan at the time. They're brought to life in the game and covered in so much great detail in the first parts of the book itself. Return of the King, it lays out the situation in many of the characters, mostly in the first half of the book. There's some very eccentric figures and some pretty wild situations that set up this story. But if you truly want an account of what happens, then Dalrymple, it really gets into it here. Some of the stories of the battles are quite harrowing. For example, the British and their sepoys being attacked as they tried to flee from Kabul. All along the way, they're ambushed on the way to Jalalabad. Thousands of people died, and a lot of civilians were in this train of people as well. I mean, it is a battle after all. There's no sugarcoating that. The book tells a story. The game gives you more of a sense of what is happening with the power shifting politically and militarily at the time. There is a lot of flavor text on those cards too, so you don't have to read as you're playing, but it's interesting to read the cards in your tableau at the end of the game, especially if you're victorious. I remember one time playing solo, I beat the Wakan Automata bot there, and I pulled all the cards together and I noticed how much of them actually connected. For example, like at the Bolan Pass and the Bulaki smugglers, they all kind of work together along with other regions. They just sort of ties together. Really neat thread comes from your tableau at the end of the game. Oh, and it's pretty cool to have a game that's it's not specifically about farming or producing things in like a Euro game style, but it's got a sheep card, which that's pretty cool. I always appreciate that. So the second pairing that I'd like to recommend is 1979 Revolution in Iran by Dan Bullock from Dietz Foundation, and that pairs really nicely with All the Shah's Men by Stephen Kinzer. I don't have a physical copy, I've just got an ebook copy myself here. This is an example of a book that I'd read a while back, before I even got into gaming. So I started to seek out a game that was covering this conflict, specifically the CIA-backed coup in Iran in 1953. So I started poking around and found out that Dan was developing this game, which covered the 50s, as well as the revolution that more of us will be familiar with in 1979. Reading the book and also the digital graphic novel that it inspired, just simply called Operation Ajax, it was the first time that I had learned about the US and the UK meddling in Iran's democratic process to protect their oil interests in the region and also weed out the scourge of communism at the time. I'm not surprised to see this isn't a topic that's often covered in wargaming, or really at all before this game, considering the audience for wargaming doesn't really like to focus on a topic where the US or the UK are the bad guys. Necessarily the game itself, unlike Pax Pamir, is very much on rails, and it's kind of a lot of chrome in it to sort of model the whole situation here. The cards sometimes have very specific interactions, and there's a lot of other neat mechanisms built into the game, like there's blind draws for the coalition player. You don't know what you're going to get before you place it on the map. The game is split into two eras. The early era is what's actually covered in this book, All the Shah's Men. The late era represents the decades that led up to the 79 revolution. Depending upon which era, pieces on the board can be working for or against you as the player on either side here. And you can alter history through stability checks that knock the current leader out of position and racking up points for the opposition that knocked them out at the time, and could possibly even trigger the end game. I think Dan's game does an amazing job of telling the story here. At least the part of the story that I knew about the coup leading up to, the events leading up to, and shortly after that. The book is a really fascinating account of what went down, referencing CIA documents that were declassified half a century after everything actually went down. Very little was known about CIA and MI6 role in the coup at the time, during the coup, and even the years after, even up to the time that Khomeini came into power. So from the outside looking in at the time, is very much of like a they hate us for our freedoms type moment, maybe for Americans. So this is represented in the CIA MI6 cards in the game, which will count against the Shah's side. So exposed truths essentially end up counting against the regime and their place in history. Many players will probably be coming into this game and this topic with fresh eyes, basically having never experienced it before. I haven't read the book since playing the game, and I was able to playtest it a year or so before it actually came out, so I think it's time for a revisit. Also, I do need to read a book specifically on the 79 revolution at some point, so open for recommendations on that. It'd be really good to get a little bit more backing on that, but the game really brings that story to life. So I highly recommend both this book and this game. This is the game that I actually cover in one of my earlier videos, teaching how to play and a little bit of the history. So if you ever want to get into it, check out that video to learn more about that game. So here's the game that truly got me into conflict simulator games, Cuba Libre. It's part of GMT's coin series. Cuban Revolution is something I at least knew a little bit about, but I never read any one book on the topic before playing. And I can't remember if I had learned about this book, T.J. English's Havana Nocturne, before reading Jeff and Volka's notes in the actual game. I just stumbled across the book myself, but either way, it was the first book that I've actually read on this topic. I bet there's a lot of other books out there I should read someday that maybe focus more on Castro's movement, the July 26th movement, or Batista trying to hold on to power, the fight between those two specifically. But I can tell you, this book does a really great job of setting up the story of the American Mafia's role and interest in Cuba during the 40s and 50s right up to the revolution. It's truly the story of the syndicate faction in the game, the green guys, right? So with a big focus on Meyer Lansky. But you'll also learn about other mobsters that are represented as cards in that events deck in the game. Santo Trafficante, Anastasia. And the story does still serve as a good reference point to the timeline of events, the battle between the guerrillas, Batista's government's perspective. This book is really great insight into how intertwined the government was with the mobsters and their casino business, which was something that really comes through in the game itself. Those two factions, they often do end up working together, trying to push back the other insurgents and vice versa. I haven't quite finished the book. My bookmark's still in there, so no spoilers, okay? Kind of know what's happening. It's a very enjoyable read. It truly is a page turner. I'm having as much fun reading this as I do playing the game. Cuba Libre itself. And I say this as someone that's not like a huge mafia aficionado. It's not like I read a ton of books or watch a ton of shows or movies on gangster lifestyle, mob. I haven't actually ever watched The Godfather all the way through, so feel free to roast me in the comments on that one. But I find the story is quite compelling because it shows how conflicts and revolutions are sometimes powered by more than just the citizens that are pushing back against the tyrannical governments. Often the criminal underworld plays a part in world history, redrawing maps and putting people into positions of official power. Cuba Libre is another game that I covered in a previous video, how to play, a little bit of a history overview. So again, if you want to learn about the game, learn how to play, go check that video out as well. So I did mention my other teaching videos that I've done so far. Those videos will be linked down in the descriptions below. So it's still going to be the focus of the channel. I'm still going to do a lot more of those on future games moving forward. I don't have a teaching video for Pax Pamir 2nd edition, nor will I ever, because honestly, there's another channel, Modern Cardboard. It's created by Pete Krause. His Pax Pamir video is absolutely brilliant. It's how I learned to play. I couldn't recommend anything better than that, and I couldn't make anything better than that, so please do go check it out if you want to learn Pax Pamir 2nd edition. Maybe one day I'll do a history lesson on the great game and how it relates to the game a bit more, but Pete's got you covered when you want to learn how to play. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I mentioned, I plan on doing more of these in the future. For now, hey, give me your feedback. Do you have any other books on these topics that you'd like to recommend, or any other pairings that you'd like to see? History pairings, history books, history games, what goes good together, pairings that you think are ideal. So sound off in the comments, or hey, go visit that BGG Geek list for history books and games paired together, and let us know what you think. So for now, thanks for watching. See you soon.